I'm not checking text messages. Again, as she said, I am the Jeff Evans. I'm a 3-time Gold Star family member. I recently retired from 31 years in education. I worked at Douglas High School. Got a whoop in the back. I was at Douglas High School for 13 years. I finished off my last 5 years. I went out to Eureka, Nevada. 2,000 kids to 100 kids. Huge difference. I have a beautiful wife, Dina, who's in the front row. Yesterday was our 34th anniversary. I did not forget, so that was a good thing there. My oldest son, Austin, is a Douglas High School grad, UNR grad, and he's presently up at Tahoe as a firefighter paramedic. My youngest son, Jake, is a Douglas grad, UNR grad also. He is a critical care flight medic with the Nevada National Guard's 238th Dust-Off Unit, and he also works at RIMSA as a paramedic. I'm going to tell you a couple stories today, and sometimes I get emotional, sometimes I don't, so if I do, please bear with me. October 24th, 1968, my uncle, Specialist 4 David Lynn Evans, was on a flight, helicopter flight. He was retrieving special ops soldiers from the Parrots Beak area of Vietnam. They were going, it's a 3-corps area, they were going to fly the wounded and some of the soldiers back to the Ben Hoa area. On the way back in the middle of the jungle, his helicopter was shot down. My uncle was the door gunner on the helicopter, 19 years old. The helicopter came down in a controlled crash. The soldiers that survived the crash got off, made it to safety in the jungle. My uncle stayed on the gun in order for them to make it to safety, laying down cover fire. It was during this act that my uncle was shot and killed. My uncle was 19 years old. Obviously, I never met my uncle. 19 years old, that was the average age of soldiers that were killed in Vietnam. My dad was in Vietnam in 1968 with my uncle. My dad came home from his first tour. In 1970, he re-upped. On November 24th, 1970, my dad was with the Army Security Agency's 156 Aviation Unit. He was on a recon flight, which is what they did, gathering intelligence, and his airplane, his RU-6A Beaver aircraft, collided with an ascending ARV and UH-1H Vietnamese helicopter. It was a catastrophic crash. There were no survivors. 17 people were killed, 4 people on my dad's airplane, and 13 Vietnamese soldiers on the helicopter that died. My dad had 3 weeks to go in his second tour before he was going to be able to come home. Of the 58,318 deaths in Vietnam, 58,000 plus names on the Vietnam Wall, only 31 sets of those were brothers. My dad and my uncle were one set of the 31 sets of brothers. So my family gets to go visit 2 names on the Vietnam Memorial. Fast forward to 9/11. After 9/11, my little brother, decided he wanted to enlist. He enlisted on his second tour in in Iraq on a second tour. My brother was injured in a massive IED explosion. Was injured, came home, had a hard time dealing with the pain. About a year later, due to the service-connected injuries that my brother endured, he passed away in 2011 at 41 years old. In December of last year, my family was able to take the trip of a lifetime. We were able to go visit the locations where my dad and my uncle were killed in Vietnam. You guys know how working with the government is. It took 13 months of me working with the government, working with the National Archives to actually figure out where my dad and uncle were killed. They would send me packets full of information, of all the information I ever wanted to know about my dad and uncle, except the information I really wanted to know, which was the coordinates of where they were killed. If I'm going to go all the way to Vietnam, I want to visit the spot where my dad and uncle were killed. After a little while, I found a Vietnam vet that went the extra mile helping me find that information. So once we got the actual coordinates and the maps, trying to match maps up from 1968 and 1970 to present day Google Maps was very, very difficult. A lot of the place names have changed, a lot of the topography in Vietnam with the just the water, the canals, the rivers, a lot of that changed. After, like I said, about 13 months of trying to figure that out, I thought I had the right coordinates. We sent them ahead to Vietnam, and thank God they got in the hands of our guide and interpreter, who was the same guy, because that guy will forever be a family friend of ours, because he went the extra mile making sure that he had the right spots. So after we had the coordinates, we planned our trip, and day one of our trip in Vietnam was the day to figure out where my uncle was killed. We got in a van, and with our guide and interpreter, it was my wife, my two boys, and my daughter-in-law, and our guide, and we drove and drove and drove. We drove into the jungle. The roads got skinnier, the bridges got smaller, the canopy cover got thicker, and this is the stuff horror movies are made of. You're trusting that these people that you just met the day before are gonna get you to the right spot. So 2 hours driving into the jungle, we pull up in front of this farmhouse. And I asked our guide, I go, is this the spot? Is this the spot? And he goes, nope, we still have to walk. 20 to 30 more minutes of walking in the jungle, and we're going past rice paddies, and we're going through swamps, and we're going through mud puddles. We stop, and that's like 30 minutes later. We stop, and our guide goes, this is the spot. And I went, and I don't know if I wanted to believe him, if I heard him, I'm not sure. And he goes, Jeff, this is the spot. So I stopped, and I had stared at satellite maps of this area for so long, I actually recognized it from the ground level. Trying to imagine 1968 Vietnam with my uncle on a helicopter laying down cover fire, it was so surreal. I mean, I'm standing at the spot where my uncle was killed at 19 years old, and just trying to imagine that was unbelievable. There's two small farmhouses in this area. Probably 6 or 8 of the farmers started wandering out. They're looking at us, when obviously we're not something you see in the jungle every day, maybe since 1968, you know, and they're looking at us like, what are you guys doing here? So our guide's telling them, and an older woman walks out. And I asked our guide, I go, hey, ask her if she was here in 1968. So he did, and she goes, oh yeah, I was born and raised here. And in 1968, she was approximately 18 years old. She was a freedom fighter for the South Vietnamese at the time. And I go, ask her if she remembers a helicopter crash and a gunfight. As soon as our guide said that, and remember, all this is in Vietnamese, but you kind of are picking up the sign language. As soon as he asked her if she was there in 1968 and remembered the helicopter crash and gunfight, she goes, right there, that's where it happened. She remembers it because she was there. It was unbelievable. We were shocked. 13 months and a lifetime of waiting, and 13 months of trying to figure out if I got the right coordinates. It was validated because I met a woman who was there and she remembered it. So I said to our guy, to go, hey, tell her that I'm the nephew of the guy on the machine gun. As soon as he says that, homemade rice wine started flowing. And some of it was good, some of it wasn't. Some of it actually tasted like tequila. I don't know how that happened. But they wanted us to drink that with them in honor of my uncle. And the Vietnamese people were the best part of our trip. They were so welcoming. They were bringing fruit that they had grown. My wife got a hold of a guava that needed a lot more ripening than what she got. She might have lost a tooth or two. But you know what? We did our best to eat it because they were offering it to us in honor of my uncle. So after this, the woman says, have you guys seen the memorial? And we go, memorial? We're in the middle of the jungle. And she goes, the memorial was built for the Vietnamese soldiers in the area that died, and one of yours, one American. And our guide says, that has to be your uncle. I mean, again, just getting blown away on day one in Vietnam. We go over, we look at the memorial. He sees on the memorial in Vietnamese that was referring to my uncle's helicopter. Again, just blown away. Day 3 was the day to find where my dad was killed. And I knew my dad was on an island in the middle of the Hao River in Can Tho, Vietnam, in the middle of the Mekong Delta. We hop on a boat in the marina. We ride to this island. We get off of the island. On the island, there's this really narrow trail. There's not a lot of nice trails. Get on this really narrow trail, and the farther we walk, the narrower the trail gets. The vegetation's taller than us. Pretty soon we get to an area where there's no trail, and I hear my wife shriek. And I look around. She's got a bug on her that none of us had ever seen. We have no idea what this bug was. I asked our guide, I go, hey, how much farther? Because again, we have no trail, and he's stomping through trying to get us to the right spot. How much farther? He's like, oh, it's just right here, like 10 feet, 20 feet. And then he goes, but we have to be careful of snakes. So my wife and daughter-in-law, of course, go, snakes. And so I said to him again, how much farther? And on the snakes, we asked a Vietnam vet, we told him about it, and he goes, yeah, those were called 2-minute snakes. You were dead 2 minutes after they bit you. So thank God that I said, you know what, we're fine where we at. I'm standing where my dad died. The dad I never knew, I'm standing where he died, on the dirt. People are like, oh, you had closure. I never knew my dad, so I didn't have closure, but I had a connection. You know, I felt a connection to a dad I never knew. Dad was 23 when he died. Mom was 23. I was 2 years old. My brother was 1 year old. Standing on this island, it was so green and so beautiful and so peaceful. Trying to imagine that island in 1970, Vietnam, in war-torn Vietnam, it was interesting. But I had a connection to a dad I never knew. This lifetime of waiting and those first 3 days in Vietnam were just amazing. So the trip was incredible. It did wonders for me. Now, as I said, I recently retired as an educator for 31 years. I always made it my duty to put up the American flag at home football games. What I wanted to do. I always had a student volunteer help me, and I would always tell that student volunteer that this was the most important part of the game. My last 5 years when I was in Eureka, Nevada, I had a student that helped me. Her name was Gabriella Minoletti. Wonderful, wonderful child. And of course I would tell Gabby this is the most important part of the game. I told her so much she started telling me that. Her senior year, she was my student body president, and she said this about me during her commencement speech at graduation. She said that I taught her that the game wasn't important. The freedom to play the game was what was important. I never thought about it like that. The freedom to play the game was what was important. You can look at that like this for this ceremony. While this ceremony is important, the freedom to be able to have this ceremony is more important. So we have to love that as Americans, that we have those freedoms. Several years ago at the Gold Star Memorial, I met a wife and a mom and 2 little boys, not too little, but they're probably 10 years old, at the Gold Star Memorial in Sparks. Those 2 boys were me and my brother. Their mom was the boys were 1 year old and mom was 4 months pregnant with the youngest boy when their dad was killed in Afghanistan. Those boys were me and my brother. They never knew their dad. We never knew our dad. I've tried to stay in touch with those boys quite a bit. Their dad was killed 41 years after my dad was killed, and we still have Gold Star kids. I'm a Gold Star kid, 57-year-old Gold Star kid. They're young Gold Star kids. 41 years later, we still have Gold Star kids. In 2018, the state of Oregon dedicated a portion of Highway 39 in Klamath Falls, Oregon, to my dad, my brother, and uncle with Fallen Hero Memorial Road signs. We were able to create a foundation with the Highway 39 Memorial. Not every Gold Star kid is as fortunate as I've been. I've been blessed. Have I had some tragedy in my life? Yes, but I've been blessed. I had a wonderful, wonderful stepfather who raised me, who to this day is still in my life, and he's a wonderful, wonderful man. A lot of Gold Star kids don't have that. My foundation, we want to create that. We want to be able to help those kids out, help Gold Star families out. Memorial Day is about remembering, but more important, I think, is Memorial Day is about freedom. Freedom brought about by sacrifice because of soldiers, Gold Star families, veterans. That's what we have. We must tell our stories. We must say the names. We must tell our stories to our kids and to our grandkids. And we must tell them so they remember them and that they can tell the stories to their kids and their grandkids. If you're a veteran, if you're a teacher, if you're a first responder, if you're Gold Star and you're here today, God bless you. Thank you guys for letting me talk today, and God bless America.
Amen.